Welcome back to the Lanterne Rouge Cycling Podcast presented by Zwift, the online cycling platform that's made my training fun. Basque Country, the last stage, stage 6, just like last year. It goes straight into the list of the best stages of the year, even whatever happens later in this year. Unreal stage from Eibar to Arate, 135 kilometers. My voice is already gone from shouting at the TV during this. It's like Pyrenees Stage 8 on steroids. Like I said yesterday, it's unreal stage. We have all day up and down climbs, but they're longer than what we've seen this week. The big one that starts off is the Azurki 5K, 7% descent. Gorla, 9.6K is 5.6%. And the descent of that is where Freyler sent it with Arambaru the Guru, and Roglic and Guru went with him last year, and that was the insane Roglic-Pogačar raid. Valley, Krabbelin, the hardest climb. 4.1K is 10.5%. That's where McNulty cracked hard. It's got some 15% sections. Descent, then a 5K, 5%, steady climb. Descent, false flat uphill, and then the Arate or Uzarsa climb. 4.6K is 8.5%. Some steeper sections, but it's not as hard as Krabbelin. But at the back end of a stage like this, it is hard. And it has a descent finish where Roglic won on one of the first stages of the Vuelta in the last couple of years. Little quick descent finish. And to remind you, by the way, the GC positions going into this stage. Evenepoel 2 seconds ahead of Martinez on Ineos. Bit of a poison chalice having the GC lead going into this stage if you don't have a strong team. Bilbao, third on 20. Izagirre, 21. Vlasov, 22. Jonas, 29. Mas, 37. And Roglic all the way back in 105. Jonas and Vlasov were not credited with the same time as Martinez after the crash yesterday. Benji went through the rules, and it kind of looked like it should have been a 3K rule, but apparently it wasn't. The commentators told DS. Anyway, Benji, breakaway actually wasn't the same big fight that we saw last year. It was kind of non-threatening guys.
Yeah, certainly. There were some riders in there that are very decent climbers. We've seen Cristian Rodriguez in the breakaway the entire week, and he's gone for the KOM points once again in this stage. Together with Formulo and Galopin, that's the first three-man group that kind of formed on the El Corieta climb at the start. Then two riders followed, Oliveira and Asparin. Oliveira is a Movistar rider, so that means he could potentially lead up to be a satellite rider for Enric Mas in this race. Then a third group formed in the road as well, but that group would not really play a role in this stage, as they would eventually all be caught. But one rider in there I do want to mention, Igor Arieta, rides for Equipo Pharma, and just in case he wins a World Tour race in 3 years, I want to say that this is a 19-year-old with a lot of talent. He was 7th at Gran Camino and a decent climber. Today, he didn't really play a role in the stage, but just wanted to get that out there. When it comes to Quick Step behind, they were like, okay, well, if the break wins a stage, well, bonus seconds are gone. That's good for little boy Remco. So I guess they were happy with that. And the gap went up to 6 minutes until a different team started taking over. Ineos started taking over before the broadcast started, so no clue at one point they decided to go and which were the first riders of their team to start pacing. But when the broadcast started with about, 75 kilometers to go, roughly, it was indeed Fraile setting up the tempo for Ineos. And this was already, we went over that Azurki climb already, so we were moving towards that Gorla climb where, like you mentioned, in that descent of that Gorla climb last year, Aramburu was hammering Demon descending for Astana. We wouldn't see that this year as he's not at the start here, but when they took up that Gorla climb, Fraile was not exactly doing a crazy temp. When it looked like Thomas was taking over for a bit and Fraile went into the second position, did you expect them to do something here, or did you expect them to wait until the Krabbelin climb?
Krabbelin, I thought they, like me, if you just make every climb kind of hard, then Remco is going to struggle more than one all-out climb on Arate. That being said, the risk is if you spend your domestiques early and you drop Remco, well, then you're going to get in a situation with the long valley after Krabbelin, with the climb before Arate is not that steep. You need domestiques there, and if Martinez is isolated, Remco's gone, Vlasov, Jonas, Izagirre, Bilbao will attack him. And I know people have said I've harped on about it, and we saw it again today. Martinez sucks at descending, and those Basque guys are lethal. So That's the risk. You spend the guys early to put Remco into difficulty. Like it's all a question of how much you think Remco can hang on Arate. If you think he's a really big threat, then what they did, I mean, to be honest, their hand was forced. Because as we got deeper into this race, we get to the Crabbling climb. Not too much happened. No one attacked on the descent. It was sad to see Fraile in prison on the same descent this year. Did you see him through the corners, Benji, in the Spanish Champs jersey? I think he was gapping Tao off the wheel, and he had to wait in every hairpin, look back, and he's like, oh, it's not Aaron Baru here. I have to wait, and I can't just risk life or death with him. Anyway, get to Crabbling. Thomas paces. Fraile goes backwards. Tullett's dropped. Rodriguez can't help. Adam Yates is not looking good. Still a big group. Thomas finishes his pull, and then Tao Gegenhardt takes over. But it's kind of like his Luz Arden or Portet pull wasn't really going anywhere, not dropping anyone. And Roglic attacked Benji really strongly on the steep section as they got to Crabble in. He's a minute 5 back. And he goes with a group of GC favourites, Martinez, Vlasov, Mas. What's the plan here for Jumbo? Is it just make the race hard, make Martinez isolated?
I think the situation that I would expect them to want from this is that Roglic goes, the others respond, and Remco, for example, brings back Jonas to that front group, so everybody except Jonas has spent energy here. But the problem is, Remco wasn't looking that great on the steep sections of that Krabbelin climb. We know that when it comes to the steep sections, he needs to do his own tempo, so it wasn't that likely that Remco was going to bring him back so easily to that group ahead. Now, before we get into the fact to how Jonas eventually perhaps ended up in the front group again, did you think that was a good strategy, having Roglic attack?
Yes, I think it was good, but I don't think he should have continued pulling. He stopped eventually. Yep. He takes a while, and then he stopped, and then it was up to Marcel Vlasov to pace. He was waiting. It seemed like he was waiting for Jonas to bridge that group. I think ideally they wanted something like, I don't know, Roglic, Vlasov, Mas, Jonas, no Martinez. And then even with Martinez, maybe work him over on the descent. But yes, Jonas was bridged across, we think, to Juanpe Lopez, all 55 kilos of him to that group. But Roglic was kind of done. Like, he pulled really, really hard. And it was Remco Benji. I wasn't that concerned about him on Krabbelin. He wasn't cracking. He was, draft was minimal on the 15% sections. To me, he was like, if all these GC guys go together, they're not going to work on the descent and in that valley. And if I just do my own pace, even if I lose 8 seconds, 10 seconds, it's better than doing the big surge. The problem is, Benji, he does this on every climb. And I think at some point he needs to be able to, or he has to respond to surges. On this occasion, so steep doesn't matter, whatever, ride your own pace. But it's just something I think he needs to eventually be like, he can't just say, I'm going to ride my own pace every climb. No GC guy does that.
Yeah, I agree with that. And I do agree that at this place it was a good decision to make that move, because we, like you said, know that GC riders don't exactly like working together with each other unless they all have the same goal. And yes, some riders at the front were having similar goals. They paced for a tiny bit, and certain riders tried to attack left and right again. But the thing is, like, there's also valleys in between the climbs that are coming up and so forth. So all that will play a role. Now, the interesting part is that Bilbao was also dropping at that point, and was actually behind Remco on the Krabbelin climb. But we saw some more attacks at the front, right?
Yeah, big attack from Enric Mas. Actually, good timing. It was marked. I think Roglic paced it back. But he created that selection of himself, Vlasov, Jonas, Roglic was dropped, Martinez, and I'm not sure if Izagirre was there. Bilbao was certainly dropped. Remco was also on a gap. But as you said, Remco is G2, let's say, and Bilbao was behind him. Up the road, Formolo had gone solo about a minute ahead. It was rapidly decreasing. He was on the descent already. And Oliveira, the domestique from Movistar, was somewhere in the middle. We had no moto on him, so no one knew exactly where he was. But at this point, with Formula dropping him, obvious that he should be a satellite rider. And before we get into this, where this race went from quite entertaining to one of the greatest of the year. I'll mention our show partner, Zwift, the online cycling platform that I've been using. And it's made a huge difference to me being able to do even an hour, even an hour and 15 on Zwift, particularly compared to when I was riding in a proper city environment in Brisbane, has been such better bang for buck. The constant pedaling, no traffic lights, just doing the set watts that I want to do. It's been so good for me. You can even do structured workouts. You can train solo. But you get real friends, virtual meetups as well. Or you can join a club. There's over 130 riding clubs as well. Maybe get you ready for Zwift racing. But if you want to check it out yourself, maybe if you're in Australia heading into winter, you can go to Zwift.com for a free 7-day trial through the link in the description down below. Thanks as always to Zwift for supporting and making LRCP possible. Okay, descent, Basque Country, steep, technical. Masters got Oliveira drop back. He's pacing it, decent pace, because I didn't really know what Jumbo should do. And no one was attacking Martinez, Benji. This is all good for Danny Martinez, because I was like, someone's going to attack him. And Bilbao appears out of nowhere. Like, he must have done. This is, what's your thing? You want drones on descents. You wanted it for
Yes,
Moritz
exactly. Yes, I don't know the technical capabilities and the dangers involved, but imagine drone footage of what Bilbao did today. He crested top, I think, multiple seconds behind Remco of that crumble and climb. The gap is roughly 20 seconds, 16 to 20 seconds at the top towards the front of the race. And out of nowhere, 2 to 3 kilometers later, perhaps I'm minimizing it a bit, I think it was roughly 3 kilometers, 4 kilometers from the top into that descent, Bilbao was at the front. Like, that is insane. One of the best descenders in this peloton, and one of the best things I've seen all year when it comes to like a surprise performance. Well, we know it's a wonderful descender, but to see it happen every single time again is just wonderful. And this plays a role even in the later part of the descent, because Bilbao gets to the damn front of that group and keeps on going. And this has an effect on the group, because we know that Martinez is not a great descender. Martinez is being put on gaps and gaps and gaps on, what was it, 50 meters at some point you said? And also Movistar in trouble?
Yeah, Martinez already under pressure, letting a gap glow. I saw a split. And here's the thing. Martinez, I think, crashed on the Passo João descent, but he tends to just let the wheel go and go slower. So that's why he's more of a risk of losing time. Whereas Masters tried on Carpena, he crashed out of Tirreno Adriatico following on that descent. I've said it multiple times. Masters descends on the hoods. He slid out on Carpena. Yeah. He descends. Remember when Roglic attacked No Risk No Glory stage? He was descending on the hoods, being gapped out of every corner every time with Lopez closing it. He tries to follow Bilbao. It's a left-right. Bilbao, instead of braking, flows through the chicane with steering through the corner, and Mas just panic brakes. He panic brakes, goes straight. I think it was him, and then Oliveira stopped, but we didn't get great footage. And he goes into a guardrail, but we do see the two of them standing up afterwards. But it could have been bad. It was another nearly Lucas Hamilton situation. But that's his GC race done. And he was looking fucking good on Cramberland. So I would have liked to see what Musk could do on Arate. Maybe he wouldn't have done anything. But still, shame for him. But that's the danger of following Bilbao. And you saw in Carpena, Pog let Bilbao go. He's like, there's a 20-kilometer valley. I'm good. We'll catch you. And I think Bilbao's the best descender in the world. I think he's the best. Because technically he is flawless sometimes. And it's because it forces him to ride straight. When he's uphill, he rides in a zigzag.
Yeah, that's a perfect example, but I think it's very difficult to compare the top descenders. I think Bilbao is definitely technically one of the best, if not the best descender. But when it comes to pure aero on a straight road, I think Mohoric takes the lead in that, personally.
You're right. Yeah. Technically, on these fast descents, unreal. Anyway, he's created a split, or the crash has, or whatever has, and we have a split of two Basques, Bilbao Izagirre. Now, remember, on GC, they're ahead of Vlasov and Jonas, who are also in the group. But Jonas and Vlasov are better than them on the climbs, one would think normally. And yeah, so they all just work seamlessly together. Remco is behind. He was in Martinez descended so slowly. He was back in the Remco and Roglic group. And so in that valley, unreal performance from Remco. Benji. Is this the curse of the jersey that Jumbo was trying to avoid? If Martinez is in yellow, Remco's not, does Martinez do 50% instead of 20% of the work in this valley?
Oh yeah, I would definitely say that
Really?
Remco would be trying to benefit from Martinez a lot more in the chase then. But on the other hand, Remco needs to get to the front as well. So on paper, he also needs to pace. And yes, he did most of the work, but it's also more fitting for him, the terrain there, than it is for Martinez. He knows that if he does it, they get closer. If Martinez does it, the gap is going to stay the same. So in my opinion, it was likely going to be more just better if he rode most of it. And yeah, that's going to cost him. But the faster that he gets to the group ahead, you would expect that the faster you can recover. But that's not exactly what happens, is it? At the front, Bilbao goes to the front of the group in that descent of the, what was it? The second last climb that wasn't exactly the craziest climb and was shallow gradients in that descent there of Bilbao, went to the front, hammered it in that front group, but Remco actually kept that relatively well in that descent and even came closer in that descent. Do you think that's because Bilbao didn't necessarily go all out in that descent, or do you think that's because, I don't know, I have no clue?
It was less. It was more shallow. It was less technical. It was a pedaling descent. Remco is still fast and error on these descents like we've seen this week. So yeah, that's the reason Remco going 100%. Whereas I think Bilbao and Vlasov, Jonas, and Izagirre were not. They were still holding a bit back. They got the Arate climb to come. They're worried about who's going to drop who. They have to hold something back. Whereas Remco's doing full and he's faster on the flat. Aero anyway. He closes a 30-second gap largely himself. Danny Martinez helped a little bit. They get to that group. It all stalls. Jonas is like, how are you back here? Starts talking to, this is why I said Jonas is a bit sleep. He's asleep half the time. Starts talking to Remco and Izagirre and Martinez just right away on the flat. They just right away. And then they eventually got brought back and Roche was gone. He got dropped. I'm trying to think. They all started. It was intermediate sprint time, Benji.
Yeah.
Remco then did a huge lead out through. There's a 3-2-1 second intermediate sprint. I know this is going on for a while, so I'll cut to the Arate climb. Remco took the 3 seconds, doing like a Jala style lead out. Danny Martinez second. So that meant that Remco didn't really mean much, to be honest. It meant that if he came third and Martinez second and no time gap, he would still win GC.
You're right. But the question there is then, he's giving such a performance to try and get that 1 second on the second person at that intermediate sprint that you question yourself, well, Remco, you dropped on the Krabbelin climb. The Arate climb has steep sections in the middle of that. I think it goes up to 15% if my mind serves me right at some point. So is that necessary? Would you have done that if you were Remco?
It's a big effort. I don't know. I think, again, him being in the jersey really cost him today, I think, because obviously the play is for Remco to make this into a longer TT and attack before Arate and then hope there's finessing behind. And instead of using a match to attack, he used it for the intermediate. So yeah, I think it's kind of like the Giro Benji. Remember, he did that huge effort to get 1 second against Bernal in the Giro. And he said, I'm never doing that shit again. Anyway, they get to the Arate climb, all in group together. Izagirre, Vlasov, Jonas, Martinez, Remco, Gino Mader's come back. He's pacing for Bilbao. Soler is there on the back. Formolo's attacked before. He'd been in the break all day. They don't chase. He gets 40 seconds. He looks absolutely ruined. Now the question is, Vlasov and Jonas, they need 20 seconds on Martinez. On this sort of climb, Martinez needs to be under big pressure to do that. And then nothing happens. Finessing. Izagirre attacks, and then Remco drops. This is what's weird to me, Benji. Remco drops so early on this climb, so early, and he finishes it in the end 24 seconds behind the leaders. That, I don't know what that is. It doesn't make any sense to me.
I think I know what it is. He was together with Tim de Klerk way too much that he's got an automatic limit on his watts when it comes to climbing and can't go over that. And therefore, he's stuck as those watts for the entire climb. That's my theory.
Yeah, it seems like he just wants to do his pace. And anyway, because because when he gets dropped, the group then sits up. They sort of start finessing. There's the GC dynamic. Jonas and Vlasov are marking each other. Izaguirre's attacking, trying to get time on Martinez. Martinez doesn't want to close too much, and he had a pretty easy time of it. Eventually, he starts pacing. Maida's gone. Bilbao's dropped, and I think the biggest, nothing's really happening, just Martinez pacing, because he's like, if we get to the finish together, I win GC. I don't care about the stage. And so he's pacing. They finesse with like a kilometer to go to the top of this climb with the little descent afterwards. And then Jonas and Vlasov shift out. There's a spectator in the way. Jonas chops Izaguirre, the second person he's crashed in 2 days. And Vlasov unintentionally, but regardless, Vlasov starts hard pacing because he's 4th or 5th on GC. Izaguirre was 2nd or 3rd. And I was like, no. Izaguirre, the Basque, he will come back on these slopes with everyone in the orange Euskaltel colours, gets up, Armstrong style, catches them back. And so we have a group of Soler, Izaguirre, Vlasov, Vingegaard, who didn't look good. He didn't have it on this climb, couldn't really attack at all. Martinez looked strong. GC was done when they got to the crest. I thought Soler would take it, had a little nibble at 50-1 in play. He didn't. He attacked over the crest, Roglic style, and Izaguirre came round him, Vlasov in the wheel, and takes the stage. After crashing on the climb, takes 2nd on GC, but Martinez wins GC. I'll do the stage. Izaguirre, Vlasov, Soler, Martinez, Jonas, Bilbao on 13, Remco on 24, JP Lopez 52. Overall, Martinez takes GC 11 seconds ahead of Izaguirre, 16 ahead of Vlasov, 21 ahead of Evenepoel, who comes 4th in the end. Bilbao 32, Jonas 32, Soler actually on 7th, 126, Roglic 8th. Mas finished the stage, credit to him, 355, Uran Invisible 10th. What a stage, Benji. Unreal.
Yeah, certainly. And it's wonderful to see when Izaguirre is crashing that he then comes back and is able to do an Undertaker give basically and come back to win the stage. Absolutely beautiful to do that. And not only for the stage, but we got to keep in mind that this man probably scored roughly 300 points, 370 UCI points by just this last stage, in total for the Itzulia Basque Country for Cofidis. That is huge, and that's the thing we mentioned in our Cofidis preview. The signing is really good, and we thought it would happen at Paris-Nice. It wasn't that great at Paris-Nice, and then he comes back to Basque Country, and this is where he strikes in such fashion, and this is why they signed him. This is why they signed Jonas Izaguirre.
One of the best signings in the off-season. I remember we talked, I was like, I reckon he's on 7 figures because he can win World Tour stages, and he is a points god as well. Like, I don't know what the points is. I know I reduced everything to points, but Cofidis, like, EF are in trouble. We'll have the recap article, the must-read one, dropping on Monday from Raul. But Roglic, Benji, it seemed to me like he, honestly, from outside perspective, it seemed to me like he didn't care about GC here and was like, I'm going to go all in on Krabbelin, blow myself up, give Jonas a chance.
I agree that it looked like that, but I also think it's a conclusion or a decision based on the fact that Roglic was not as amazing form-wise as they probably hoped him to be before the race started. But in hindsight, this still doesn't make the decisions from yesterday good, necessarily.
Oh, 100%. No, 100%. Like, it still would have been better if he was closer on GC as a second threat. Like, then you can maybe play for the Arate climb or get in a move with Remco or whatever. Of course. Like, but that was maybe his legs as well. I think he knew he didn't have it, and so just went all in for Jonas today, who also, he was strong on Krabbelin and then faded a little bit at the end of the stage. What about Martinez, Benji? He's won Dauphiné 2020 GC, won a stage here, 10 bonus seconds there, huge, and got very, very lucky, it must be said, yesterday. This is a great win for Martinez, and I am full, I've been saying it for a while, Martinez, Tour de France leader for Ineos this year. He still has he's a big flaw, which is his descending and handling. And he got very, very lucky today. And this result was also like, if Remco doesn't pull him in that valley, he's fucked as
Yeah,
well.
certainly. He would definitely be fucked in that situation. But that's how the race goes. When riders are behind, when leader is behind, he's going to try pacing the front. So it's not unexpected that Remco makes that decision, and it's the risk that Remco needs to take when getting back to the front. And yes, that's part of having that yellow jersey among his shoulders. If Martinez has that, he might be able to use that against Martinez to chase more. But I still think that Remco made the biggest difference in that chase. And if it was down to Martinez, it probably wouldn't have happened, the return there. Because then in the descents, Remco wouldn't have taken the front, then Martinez would have taken the front, and that wouldn't have gone that far, even on that shallow descent, the second last one. But Martinez has his downsides, but I think when it comes to the Tour de France parcours that we have on the table here, it's not necessarily a terrible parcours in terms of descending. Basque Country is one of the races in the season where descending matters a lot. The Giro often has that a lot as well. We've got stage races where that matters a lot. The Tour de France has more these shallow, longer descents, I dare to say, based on my memory at least. So I think it's not as big as a downside for the Tour de France than it is for some other races.
I think, yes, the descending is one big flaw, but tactically, which it's really difficult to teach. Tactically, Martinez is a killer. He has that Carapaz in him. He always seems to get the most out of the guys he's with, like with Remco today. He then knows when exactly to switch gear on Arate to go from passive to the front, hard tempo, shut GC down. He rarely, I think, makes big tactical mistakes. He seems to know who's strongest in the group, who to follow, when to work, when not to work. I think he's really good tactically. And as Benji said, unless a team, which I guess Jumbo could be one of those teams, I don't see Pogacar being like, I need to attack Martinez on a descent. Unless a team really makes a concerted effort to do it in the Tour, it might not be a problem. In the Giro and Basque, it is more of a problem. But still, huge win for him. I was surprised, Benji, that he was isolated from 2Ks to go on Krabbelin. Ineos disappeared.
Yeah.
Searod gone. Adam Yates nowhere.
Yeah, and the interesting part is that Quickstep probably tried to make sure that Ineos didn't have anyone in the breakaway initially, but if a Carlos Rodriguez or someone random, a Tao Gegenhardt, is in that breakaway as a satellite rider, this race could play out even better for Martinez, where he would have had someone in the valley to pace for him when he was behind after that descent. He would have had teammates that helped him if they had satellite riders up the road. Or do you think that was a risky decision to put satellite riders up the road for Ineos? I don't think so, because they were not the controlling team necessarily. That was technically Quickstep.
I think their plan was, they didn't really want an open race. Movistar, it's a shame for Movistar. It seemed they were doing everything right. They really did a good job with Oliveira. Mas attacked on Krabbelin. It's a real shame. Maybe he could have moved up to third on Arate if he had the Krabbelin legs, but maybe he's marked. I think Martinez, because he was so far back on GC. Maybe Mas wins the stage. But yeah, it's a shame for him and for their GC, their UCI points too. I think, it's hot and cold, and it's hard to know with everyone so sick as well. But yeah, it's an unreal race. Remco, Benji, it has to be a much more positive sentiment and morale in the Quickstep camp compared to Tirreno Adriatico.
For certain, and I think despite him losing time here, it's roughly 25 seconds if my mind serves me right. That is a very good step forward for Remco as a GC rider. Now, I put that sentence on Twitter, and initially, people are like, Pogacar was winning Grand Tours when Remco at this age in his life. Well, Pogacar is the exception. Like, becoming a GC rider doesn't mean you need to become Pogacar. A GC rider for me is being able to top 7, 8 Grand Tour in the future. And based on what I saw today, I think that's a very good potential for Remco in the future. Could even be better, but he needs to prove more to get to a top 5 standard for me in my eyes. But I believe that Remco did a very good race, and he also worked for Alaphilippe during the stage race, which was fitting for the stages he did it on. So I don't necessarily feel like we need to complain about, if Remco, for example, didn't do leadouts on stage 1, 2, and 3, then he might have had a podium right now. That's possible, but they also got a stage win out of that. And I understand that they make that decision knowing that Alaphilippe is definitely, certainly a leader at Quickstep as well and deserves that to have support there. So I don't see that as an issue. Now, what do you think this means for Remco as a GC rider?
It's all encouraging. I think my standpoint remains the same. The steeper it is, the worse it is for him, whether
Mm-hmm.
that's some physiological imbalance, whether that's his weight is higher than we think. I don't know. He, on that 5K, 5% climb before Arate, he put in a huge time into the Bilbao group when they were clear. He's good on the shallow stuff. He was good on
Yeah.
Pinar in Valenciana, dropped on Magma, the steep stuff. So that's, my opinion hasn't changed on that.
But
Vuelta doesn't actually have
mhm,
many muros. Doesn't actually have much steep
correct.
stuff this
One, I
year.
think. Yeah. And the question then is like, I was exactly going to say that. The Vuelta, indeed, only one Rampa in Humanas or whatever it's called these days. Uh, the rest is relatively not shallow. There's some decent percentages in there, but not insane. And then you think about the Tour de France, and most of the Tour de France parcours throughout the years are not the climbs with super steep climbs like Pimari only happens every few years, for example, a climb like that. So I think the Tour de France on paper fits him the best of all three Grand Tours,
Nah,
is
Vuelta.
what I would say. Vuelta?
On the Granon stage, he get ruined.
No, I mean in general, like over the years, not
Oh,
necessarily this year.
like a normal Tour de
A
France?
normal,
Yes,
yeah,
yes, yes,
yeah,
100% agree. Normal Tour de France is his
yeah.
best. Like it is. It's from Indurain to Armstrong to Wiggins to Froome to Bernal's the
Aramburu,
exception. Aaron
yeah,
Baru, maybe in 3 years. Bernal's the exception. It's
yeah,
time trialists with, or time trial style guys have been good at the Tour de France. So, yeah, I think the Tour generally this year, though, that got that hard Granon stage. The Vuelta is weird this year. It is a
yeah.
lot of 15Ks, 6%, which he should be fine at. We saw at the Giro last year off a little training in the first week. There was that climb. Bernal dropped everyone. San Giacomo, maybe stage 6 or something. 15K, 6%. He dropped everyone but Remco and Dan Martin. My concern, Benji, is support. I think
Yeah.
if Remco has Ineos team, he wins GC at Basque Country.
Well, they weren't here for Martinez after Krabbelen either, so I'm not so sure actually. But in
True,
previous
yeah.
stages, yes.
True, yeah.
But the thing is, like, we can judge Quickstep based on today. In general, I think that Quickstep is not a good
Judge the
support team
roster.
for a Grand Tour.
Who's the mountain guys?
Exactly.
Who's the GC
Alaphilippe and Van
guys?
Zevenand are the only ones you could say as support for Evenepoel. Outside of that, Evenepoel could perhaps do stuff on smaller
He's
hills, but
good,
not
but
on...
older.
Yeah, exactly. Ilan van Wilder, outside of this team, is likely to be willing to ride his own races, I'm guessing, and not necessarily always supportive for Remco. But when you look at solely this stage, I think every single team looked bad. Vingegaard and Roglic were isolated. Kuz was gone. I haven't seen Kuz all day. He was missing, MIA, somewhere out in Basque Country on the beach somewhere. When it comes to other teams, Ineos was indeed isolated. Martinez was isolated on Krabbelin. Mas had Oliveira ahead. So all the teams that tactically put a rider ahead were benefited today.
Yep.
Who didn't, wasn't.
Maida was good for Bahrain. Maida was good.
For the first time
but
this year.
He's a special type of rider. Not many teams have a Gino Maida level rider for domestique duties. Unreal in the Vuelta. But yeah, Benji, like Catania, I think is good. So is Van Wilder, Vavika. It's just
not as domestique.
yeah. Knox hasn't had it. He's not looked good for a while. Honoré can't do the longer climbs. Alaphilippe's his best domestique by far for Grand Tours, but it's Julian Alaphilippe. He's the world champ. They are missing a Maida style. You know who they're missing? Joao Almeida. He'd be the best, but he's gone. But yeah, it's something. Just look at the trend. Wait for August. I would not be surprised, Benji, come August, that they are trying to stock that team full of some premium domestiques. Wout Poels, he was on Quickstep before. Wout Poels out of contract. He's on a 1 year, I think, or is he on a 2 year? I mean,
Quickstep is not the overly willing team to pay and is more bonus related, I would dare to say. So it's very difficult to get a full stacked GC team, for
that's
not a
what
lot of
people
money.
don't realize. That's what people don't realize. It is cheaper to get sprinters and lead up men and Misk Belgian
T-Bar.
cobbly guys. Yeah, like Stibar, for example. He wouldn't be cheap, but he's
Yeah.
like Richie Port, Wout Poels, Kwiatkowski. Do you know how much those guys cost in the mid-20 teens when they were 100% domestiques for Froome? Like, they
Yeah.
cost 7 figures, all of them. Maybe not
2 mil?
Poles, but
Yeah, I think.
Kwiatkowski easily 7 figures. Well, like easily.
Yeah.
Port as well, I think. Not I think, I'm pretty sure.
Pretty
So
sure.
we are seeing it is much, much more expensive to assemble a stacked GC team than it is to assemble a classic squad with some punchers as well. Like 379s, he ain't the same cost as Kwiatkowski in 2015. And UAE, they have a huge budget. They're splashing over 2 mil probably on Almeida. We've got Ineos, 50 mil budget. How can Quickstep? Who can they get?
And next to that, I would also like to add that certain teams like an Ineos are able to mold riders that are not necessarily mountain domestiques into a mountain domestique role.
Flat.
Moscon was not a mountain domestique rider before he
True.
went to Ineos, for example. And when you look at a Kasper Asgreen, that rider has done great at California when it comes to mountain stages in the past. If he was at Ineos, he would have 100% have been in a mountain train at this point in his
100%.
career.
Dylan Van Baal level.
And yeah, and I think that that's also an aspect of Quickstep that they are not able to mold a rider in that shape to make that part of that train. But then again, Asgreen might be too good in other places to be used there. But then again, Kwiat was also chained.
But the difference is, Benji, if you're Quickstep, you sign these classic guys, and the model has been you sign them to relatively low base compared to what they might get elsewhere, but bonuses for winning XYZ. So it's a tough ask. If Asgreen can get a huge bonus for XYZ, if you're like, actually, can we mold your season and training around your 20, 30-minute power to ride the second last 5% 10K climb for Remco? That's a tough ask. Whereas Ineos, they're like, when they sign them, like, yeah, you're going to get paid €1 million plus. And yeah, Tour de France, sorry, it's choo-choo time. It's a difficult thing, and it's interesting to see teams trying to balance that. And as you said, Ineos have got a Neopro, and Plapp had been in the Vuelta for Remco as his like second last man, guaranteed. They don't have that coming through either. Maybe I'm being harsh on the Masnada Catania types. They're good as well. But yeah, any last thoughts from Basque Country, Benji? I'm back. I'm semi back on Remco GC hype. I was out a bit. I'm back.
Me too. To be honest, I was a bit critical when it comes to Carpenia and so forth. I never said that Remco was going to win a Grand Tour dead on. I always had the thoughts that he could definitely top 10 a Grand Tour in the future, but that podiuming is going to be a goal that he can pursue, but is going to be something difficult. And I hadn't seen something that said, okay, he's going to podium a Grand Tour in the future. And I still haven't seen something that says he's going to podium a Grand Tour in the future, but I've seen potential that he can gradually move up to the ability to do so. God, like, Gegenhardt and Hindley podiumed the Grand Tour with nothing like what Remco has shown so far before they got to that Grand Tour. So it is possible that at a certain point, Remco is going to be fighting for a podium at a Grand Tour in the future. But you got to balance that. You got to balance the hype between staying realistic and dreaming. And I think we're at a nice trajectory when it comes to his GC stuff to see something in the future in that sense. So I'm happy that he showed this, because the Belgian media can now stop shitting on him whenever he does badly. And next to that, it's also intriguing to see a rider grow, and I enjoy that, because it would be shit if he once again had lost 20 minutes today, the entire cycle of Tirreno news once again, and I'm happy to see this. But about today's Tirreno stage, no, this is not Tirreno anymore, Benji.
Well, he made the race, right? Remco made. How much more exciting did he make this race being competitive?
Yeah.
Attacking on the false flat descent yesterday, coming back today, the tension, he made, if you love him or hate him or just indifferent, today was a great stage, like one of the
Hmm.
best I've watched this year. So I'm
Certainly.
all for it.
For me, it was the best stage of this year, the best race of this year. I enjoyed this more than the likes of an RVV, for example. Sorry,
Easily.
Flammers.
Wow.
Don't hunt me down, people.
RVV literally just like, I could go and watch a 1K sprint on the velodrome, same race, just two guys doing a 2-up sprint.
No, no, no.
San
I
Remo the
won't
best.
let that slide either. I need to stay balanced because otherwise they pull me out of my home and just throw me out of Belgium here. So I need to stay balanced to be on the edge so that I don't get deported. So I do want to say, like you said, this is the best stage for me this year. This is why I love cycling stuff like this. This is also a factor of not having Slovenians dominate this stage race. Is that harsh to say?
No, it's facts. Like, of course, it was more exciting. Like, if Pogacar's here, it's boring. If Roglic was on, then Jonas hard paces and just shuts it down. Roglic marks Arate, probably wins the stage. No, it's not as exciting. So, yeah, it was more exciting with Roglic either being off form or giving Jonas a chance, or a mixture of the two. Incredible stage. And also, when those two aren't here, the other guys who are better climbers than, say, Bilbao and Izagirre, they're not so much better that it doesn't make a difference that Bilbao and Izagirre are better at other things like guile and tactics and descending. The difference is smaller, so then they can bring in their, I don't know, NFL term, their intangibles. And yeah, it was a lovely race, very exciting. And I think Remco are going to podium the Vuelta because some TTTKs, and yeah, he should. And I don't think both Slovenians will go, but maybe you won't. Anyway, that was Basque Country. We've got Amstel Gold Race tomorrow. Otherwise, there's no other racing. Tour of Turkey on next week. We won't cover every stage, but if Quintana goes mutant, there is a good Queen stage, and there's Bennett, Ewan, Phillips in there. Outrageous sprint field at Turkey.
Yeah. But
We might cover it.
your camera just died.
But that's all from us this week. Hope you enjoyed all the podcasts from Basque Country. Make sure to like it down below if you're watching on YouTube, or give us a rating on podcast players. We've gone on too long. My camera battery's died, which is a signal for us to end it. Thanks as always to Zwift for their support of this podcast. It makes it possible, and a Giro visit possible in about 3 weeks, terrifyingly. Until I'm still Gold Race tomorrow. Ciao.